All right. And now that's in the way. Oh, my control bar's now gone over the bit of my PowerPoint slide that I need to show. There we go. Okay. All right. So this today is a little bit about introducing the menopause, but also looking at specifically my area, which is hypnotherapy, and how hypnotherapy can be supportive on the menopause journey. So I think it's really important, first of all, like we have, as some of you mentioned already, there's so little understanding around menopause that we quite often don't even understand the terminology that's used. So that's a really good starting point. So menopause, which is the word that most of us use, is actually just one day in that entire journey, and it is the day when you have not bled for a year. That is the kind of marker between being pre-menopause and post-menopause. So up until that day when you've been a year without a bleed, you would be pre-menopause, and then after that day you'd be post-menopause. And then the kind of area around that is perimenopause, which is the around menopause. So a lot of the symptoms that we experience during our what we might refer to as menopause is actually perimenopause. It's that kind of period of transition between being, you know, fully fertile and ovulating and all the rest of it, and then moving into the cessation of periods and then that postmenopausal state. So perimenopause is probably the best word for most of us to use in that kind of journey that encapsulates all of us. And I'm not going to dwell on this slide so much because it's quite overwhelming. I'm developing an app with someone at the moment on menopause, and one of the things that we were both talking about is that once you do open the door to looking at menopause and finding out about it, which again, as we've said, isn't discussed very often, you then get hit with this massive list of potential symptoms, and that can be quite overwhelming. But I think it is important to have an awareness of what some of the things that may be linked to menopause are, just so that we can be on the lookout for them and recognize those symptoms in ourselves. But it's really important to know that 25% of women won't experience any of these except for just a cessation of their periods. Their periods just miraculously stop one day and don't come back, and nothing else happens. And then the vast majority of us who do experience symptoms may have a few of these and might have a little heightened spate where one or two of them are tricky, and then they disappear, and there's an unlucky few who might have more severe symptoms. So it is important to have, and there are roughly 34 menopausal symptoms that are kind of recognized. And I think another thing that is important to understand about menopause is that they're not all directly caused by the menopause. It's not that menopause causes these things. Quite often it's that it uncovers them. So a lot of the health issues that come up for us around menopause are actually issues that have been kind of there before. So, you know, food intolerances and things that we've always had, but our bodies have maybe put up with. Our bodies kind of throw their hands up at us and say, right, that's it, I'm not doing this anymore. You know, I've had enough sugar, thank you very much, I'm just going to give you a really bad reaction now every time you eat it, or we, in my case. Or so it's really important, I think, to recognize that. And I think my personal journey with menopause, and I have been lucky, and I'll never know how much that is because I took the time to educate myself beforehand and kind of develop some proactive steps, shall we say, beforehand. I'll never know how much that has to do with why I'm coping so well, and how much I might have been lucky anyway. But my personal journey with it is that as my symptoms crop up, and change, I use that as an invitation to kind of investigate what I can do. You know, what is that telling me? I'm getting a headache around ovulation every month. What is it that I need? What can I change in my lifestyle or in the way that I'm taking care of myself that alleviate that? And I play around with that. And for me, touch wood, that has been enough. So there has been a series. The most recent one was a real bloating, and I work with the Fertility Partnership here in Norwich, and so I'm lucky enough to work with a nutritionist. So I got her on board for that one because the hypnotherapy wasn't shifting that particular thing, and so she put me on a diet to just kind of strip everything out and kind of generate my gut bacteria, etc., and then reintroduce things. So and that has really helped, because at one point I was just looking 8 months pregnant for majority of the time, which I was not happy about. So that's kind of been my approach to this, and where I've needed to, I pull in other people, and I work as part of a team myself. So so that's really helpful. Okay. So with that in mind, I quite like this analogy. And sadly, obviously, not sadly, I'm glad for Cuba that things are settled down a lot, but the necessity that they used to have, because they couldn't import the cars that they wanted, to really look after their old cars, has just led to this tradition of having these beautiful classic cars that are so lovingly taken care of. And I just think that's a really appropriate metaphor for women, you know, that actually this is really a question for most of us. And I'm really keen to stress that this is, most of us can work with our bodies to a large degree, you know, by changing diets and taking better care of ourselves. We can work things out. Obviously, there are times when you need some medical support, as there is with everything, but I don't think that menopause in itself is a medical event. So just, I think that idea, that image of thinking of ourselves as Cuban classics and giving ourselves that love and care that we need along the way is quite a good metaphor. And also to counteract the message that we receive everywhere, you know, just walking down the aisle of Boots, the anti-aging, anti-wrinkle, anti-grey, anti-this, anti-that. There's a really powerful message out there. And, you know, you look at movies, how many attractive 40 plus women do we see on the screen compared to men? It's just everywhere, this message that women aren't supposed to age. It's somehow unseemly, unattractive, undesirable. And it's a really, really important thing to be tackling. And I do think we're getting better at it. Oh, I've slipped that in the wrong place today. But it's actually been tested that in societies where age is more revered, where, you know, where women have a kind of more important role to play in society, or are seen to be important in society, the symptoms of menopause are far less. So, you know, there is a real powerful element to our beliefs around aging that actually impact our body. The beliefs that we hold, the physical affect our physical being, and how we see ourselves. So I think one of the most important things that I do when I work with people is get them to rethink aging and what they want that to mean to them and who they want to be as they age, rather than just allowing society to plonk, you know, its stereotypes on us, and more importantly, its limitations. Because I think if we expect to grow old and retain our intelligence, our power, our, you know, zest for life, our energy, our passion, our, you know, our dreams, our vitality, our sensuality, all of these things, if we expect that is part of aging for us, then it is much easier to attain that, and it comes much more naturally. So I think it's really the mind, the element of the mind is such an underestimated aspect of our health, of our well-being, and of our just general kind of presence in life. And I love this image. I wheel it out regularly. It's a thermo imaging camera, and this shows the heat is here recognized. So the yellower, whiter parts obviously show a lot of heat. So there's a physiological response going on there, and these are different emotions, as you can see. But if you look at them, I love it. If you look at love and happiness, you've got love is happiness, but with a kind of bit more action below the waist. And shame, you know, exactly where we experience it, the red hot cheeks, anger, you know, the sensation. So all our emotions, all our feelings are physiological. They happen in our body. They affect us physically. And when we're thinking, those thoughts create physical responses. And so it makes sense to me that managing our thinking around menopause, managing our thinking around symptoms can have a really powerful effect, and does have a really powerful effect. And this is, so my personal relationship to hypnotherapy came when I birthed my daughter 13 years ago. And prior to that, I was absolute worst. And I knew that I was going to struggle in childbirth, because I couldn't even cope with injections at the time. I would pass out every single time without fail. So I was really, really nervous. But because of the fear of injections, I was no more keen to have, you know, to have the injection in the spine and to have all of that. So I was in a bit of a state talking to my midwife, and she actually recommended hypnobirthing to me, which I did, and just absolutely amazed myself with what I could do with the right mindset. And since I have 3 children, so since then I had 3 beautiful births, which really empowered me and really gave me back a sense of connection to my body and appreciation of my body that I've tried to hold on to since. And very quickly after that, trained in hypnotherapy and hypnobirthing to pass that on, and then have gradually broadened that out, but largely within the area of women's health. So I find that so powerful, so powerful. And so about, I guess, 7 years ago or so, I recognized that the next journey for me was going to, or the next milestone, the next transition for me would be menopause. And as this had served me so well through hypnobirthing, through transitioning into being a mother, I looked around for something like the hypnobirthing course for women and menopause, and as I'm sure you're aware, there's not a lot out there. And what I found is quite negative. There's an awful lot of information out there on horrendous symptoms, and, you know, HRT and an estrogen deficiency, and all of these kind of ideas that suggest to me that somehow my body isn't good enough, that I'm innately going to have problems, that there is something innate about women that make their bodies faulty. And I can't personally buy into that. I'm all for health. I'm all for getting support from the medical, from medicines and from operations, you know, and healthcare and the NHS and everything else. But I don't buy into the idea that my body is inherently faulty. I think there are times when I might need to reach out for that, but I think that it's possible for most of us to find a way, find a balance ourselves. So yeah, I developed this, and then obviously my own menopause symptoms started up, and I've been using the techniques that I've developed as I've gone along. So this is one of my favorite ones to use. It's a really good it's a really good teaching tool, actually, as well as being a really good quick technique tool to have in your toolbox, the kind of thing you could do at your desk, or if you were wandering off from your family for 5 minutes to cool down, So it's a really quick and easy technique that you can use for anything, really. I've taught it to my little boy. Used to have temper tantrums, and this was how we got him to control his temper tantrums years ago.
I have an emotional 6-year-old, so that might come in.
Yeah. The only issue you'll have, it's really easy to teach them. The only issue you'll have is that they sometimes don't want to do it. So I would have to bribe him to do it in the first place. But just like this, you can snap them out of a mood. And interestingly, I don't have to do it anymore. He just deals with it himself. He's kind of learned that. So it does what it says on the can, but it's also, I think, a really good it's a really good one to demonstrate why hypnotherapy works, and how it works for certain things. So I'll talk you through this one. It's really straightforward. It just involves closing your eyes and thinking. So if you're game.
Yes.
So the first thing to do, and obviously if you were using this as an actual tool, you would use it when you had an emotion that was that you needed to shake off. So I think it's really important to recognize that our emotions are communicating something to us. So even though we're known at menopause to overreact sometimes, or to be moody and all the rest of it, there's always something there that starts it, and it's really important to notice what that is, because even if we feel like maybe we're overreacting, there's still something that's triggering that. So I think it's always important to listen to the message of your emotions, but then sometimes they linger. Sometimes you just need to be able to kind of go, okay, enough now, so it's one, for example, if you've had a bad day at work and you're on your way home, not that anyone's ever on their way home from work anymore, but if you're coming out of your Zoom office, then it's a good one just to kind of shake things off. So ordinarily you would already have the emotion and you would work through this process, but for our purposes today, I'm going to assume you haven't got a really difficult emotion going on right now by the looks of you. So what I'm going to invite you to do is think about a time when you felt, so it might be, a typical menopausal mood, like irritation or anger or whatever. For your own comfort, don't pick something. You can do this with really extreme moods, but just for your own comfort, I don't want to invite you to re-experience something really traumatic. So pick something, because you're going to re-feel those emotions. So pick something you're okay to go with. So if you close your eyes, and people get really hung up on whether or not they can be hypnotized, and there are a big part of that is recognizing that we all visualize and can be hypnotized in different ways. So hypnosis is just taking yourself to a different time or place in your mind. So just imagining a scenario where you felt that emotion, and it doesn't have to be visual. So for some of us, we will visualize that, we'll picture it. But other people, it might be that you have, like, what were you saying in your head? And that is running through. And that's the big thing for you. Or it might be sensations in your body. It might be something somebody else is saying. It might just be being a sense. So in whatever way works for you, just have a sense of that situation as though you were seeing through your own eyes, hearing through your ears, and just kind of running the same thought processes until you start to get that emotion. And then check in with where that emotion is in your body. So if it's anxiety, it's quite often around the chest. It might be that it's just kind of an exploding head feeling or a tension. So just tune into whatever the feeling is of that situation. And then just squeeze one of your fists, doesn't matter which one, and just imagine that sensation going into that fist. And again, you don't have to wonder how, just imagine that it could. And then shake out that fist and open your eyes. Okay. So to some degree, I'm going to imagine that you managed to conjure up those feelings. Give me a nod if that's the case. Yeah, brilliant. So what we've done there is set up what's called an anchor in hypnotherapy. And an anchor is something that our brains naturally do all the time. It's part of our learning. So phobia is a really good way to explain anchors. If somebody experienced something very scary, so they have a strong emotional response to it, then the brain remembers that. It makes the connection to that event becomes then a trigger. So for example, if they got bitten by a dog, the next time they see a dog, their brain is going to be triggered and remember that and invite the person to run away. So you'll be rushed with this kind of fight or flight response to help you run away. It's a protective mechanism. Sometimes that misfires. So when you hear about people who have really odd phobias, like a button or something, what will have happened to that person is that something really terrifying happened to them, and whilst it was happening, they had a button in their eye line, and so the brain has made that connection to the button, even though the button may not have had anything to do with the scary situation, but the brain has remembered that, so it triggers. So an anchor is a trigger, and what we've done is made a little connection between the experience that you had, your feelings of whatever emotion you conjured up, and the fist clenching. Okay, so there's a little anchor that goes to them. So what we're going to do now is set up another anchor on the other side, and this one will be to something really nice. So you can think of any emotion that you would rather feel than the one that you just had. So if, for example, you picked irritation with your family, which is a common one for all of us, I think, then you might think of love. You know, you might think of a feeling when you felt really lovely towards your family, really loving, when they were really sweet to you, when they were very well behaved, when they tidied up without asking, whatever it is, that real feeling of love or gratitude, or maybe a feeling when they'd all buggered off for the day and you just had a really nice time being on your own and feeling really calm and chilled. Really,
I can't remember that anymore.
No. One day.
Yeah.
So yeah, this time, if you just take yourself to a scenario that you can remember, it might be, you might have to stretch back in your memory sometime to a holiday or something when you felt either really happy, really calm, really in love, and just do it in the same way. And you already will have had some experience with conjuring things up, and you'll know the kind of things that work for you. So if it's a visual, really focus on what you could see. And if the thoughts in your head really help, then bring that in. Maybe what you can see, maybe there's even smells that you associate with that memory. And you both seem to be really smiling, so I'm going to go ahead and guess that you're in some nice place. And with this one, because it's a nice feeling, you can really make it as strong as you like. So just recognize where you are. If there was a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the most you could feel that feeling in your body, then just notice where you are right now, and then just turn that dial up gradually so you can intensify those feelings and really allow yourself to appreciate that. And then squeeze the opposite fist and just allow that feeling to go into the opposite fist and then shake it out. Okay, so we've now, and open your eyes when you're ready, we've now set up 2 anchors, okay, for different things. Can I ask, one of you still got your mic on? Could you turn that off, or can you just check if it is? Thank you. We could put it back on a bit later for chat for one. So this time, so what you've done is set up 2 anchors to 2 very different emotions. So this is how we kind of manipulate the brain, essentially. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment is squeeze both fists. So you'll be setting off both anchors, which might have the effect of being quite confusing because you're setting off 2 very different feelings. And then we're going to go back to that first memory, so the one that gave you the uncomfortable emotion. And then you will let go of the first fist that you did. So letting go of the uncomfortable emotion, so that you're kind of overlaying the positive, resourceful state on top of that uncomfortable emotion. So you're just rewiring essentially that event for yourself. So if we do that now, so close your eyes, squeeze both fists, and then conjure up that first event in just the same way that you did in the first time, but squeezing both fists, so setting off both of those feelings. You may find it really hard to access the feelings that you had initially, or you may find it is quite confusing. And then just let go of the first fist that you clenched. So you've just got that really positive fist, and let those positive feelings kind of infuse that first experience. And just notice how it's different, how it feels different, that memory now. And then when you're ready, just open your eyes. Okay. So did you shift the feeling from that first event? Give me a nod. Yeah. Little bit. Yeah. Sometimes takes a little bit of practice to get those things going. And the secret is to get the positive one feeling as strong as you can, so it overpowers the other one for you. But you can see how those kind of techniques, you can rewrite the emotional history from things. So things like that's a very simplistic version of the kind of work that we would do on trauma, for example, being able to not go back, because of course we can't ever go back to events, but you can help people to shift where they hold trauma in their mind, and give them some resourcefulness to match it. Go on.
I think my main difficulty was there's too many distractions here, because my son and my husband are in the other room, and I'm sure you can hear the washing machine going, and I was finding it quite hard to put myself in that moment, but I could sense what you meant. So I think if I hadn't had so many distractions, I could see how it would have worked much better for me personally. So I just thought I'd
send you a little I can send you some instructions so you can play around with that one. But there's other ways of doing it. So some people work better with the feeling, so there's ways you can do it which is just focused on shifting the feeling. But yeah, what we tend to do when I work individually is hone in on the kind of things that work better for some people, and find ways that you encode your memories really, and start to personalize it. But I'll send that out to you so that you can practice it when you've got less distractions. And then once you have it down, then you can very easily use it even in a situation where there's distractions, once you've got the hang of it. So it's a good one to demonstrate anyway. But I will send that out. Okay. So one of the really powerful things I think to recognize about hypnosis and menopause is the effect of stress. So one of the things that can be really amazing, and you're a massage therapist, Christy, so obviously, this is one of the areas that you will be working with, and why what you do or one of the reasons why what you do will be very effective for women with menopause. So the importance, the relationship between menopause and stress is really important, in part because, on so many levels. The first level is that when we're in the fight or flight response, so the stress response, and most people are in the stress response a lot more than they think. We tend to, if you ask people, are you stressed? Most people say, no, I'm all right. Or a lot of people say, no, I'm okay. But actually, stress is not always kind of, yes, I'm broken, I need to go to the doctor stress. Sometimes a lot of people feel very good on stress, actually. They really like that kind of, I'm off, I'm on it, I'm in the office or whatever their career is, or around the home, or that kind of being on the go. And it can feel quite powerful. People, the adrenaline junkies, thrive on it. So I think it's really important to to recognize the difference between the kind of stress where you might see your GP, but also the kind of stress that you may well enjoy, but does take over and take up too much of your life. And I think I don't meet many women who aren't doing too much, but especially women of our age, you know, we tend to have too much on, and so we are often in the stress response far more often than we should be. When we're in the stress response, our bodies are it's turbo mode. So it's a bit like if you're running your car in top gear, you know, you're using more fuel, it takes more energy, and therefore the energy that your body needs for healing, for repairing, and for all the little transitions that are going on around menopause is not so available. So in the very first instance, managing our stress helps us to release resources for our bodies to make the transition into menopause more efficiently, more effectively. You know, we all have heard of sports women whose periods stop. You know, physical stress can mess with people's menstrual cycles. So emotional and physical stress both impact women's menstrual cycles. It's kind of our it's a real barometer for health, our menstrual cycle. And so it really, stress really shows up. So a lot of my work around fertility is in that as well. So those are two things. The other really crucial thing about stress and menopause is that one of the big beefs that everybody has around menopause is that is the fear that we're somehow going to have too little estrogen after menopause and that everything will fall apart because we're estrogen deficient. In actual fact, your ovaries will continue, assuming that we've not had a surgical menopause and we still have our ovaries intact. Healthy ovaries will continue producing estrogen. And there are also other sites in the body that produce estrogen. So the fat cells, woohoo, some good there, but also the adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands also are producing the stress hormones. So when we're in the stress response too often, we're overworking the adrenal glands, and then they're not producing the estrogen that they should. So there can be a lot of reasons why our bodies aren't producing enough estrogen, but actually it is biologically possible for women to continue to produce, a healthy woman to continue to produce enough estrogen. But most of us are showing up to menopause stressed and, you know, burnt out, you know, because of the expectations that we have on ourselves and the expectations that the world has of us to, you know, to be everything to everybody. So we are not showing up with healthy adrenal glands that are producing the estrogen that we really need. So this is a really good demonstration of what happens when we're tense and we're stressed. So if you just kind of clench your fist out in front of you and just clench it as tight as you can. If you've got long nails, don't stab yourself in the palm like I just have. But just clench that fist and focus your energy on clenching that fist. And then whilst you've got that fist clenched, just tune into what's happening with your breathing. And you're probably going to notice that your breathing is quite shallow. So you may have stopped breathing. If that's the case, do breathe. And then if you release that, you probably find you automatically take a big breath. So the difference is it's a really important skill to start to recognize the difference between when you are in the relaxation response and when you're in the stress response, because we can actually manage most of the tasks in our day in the relaxation response, even when we're busy. You know, the stress response is a default biological response, but it's only really useful if you've got to kind of run somewhere or do something, you know, fight something. It's not necessarily a very helpful resource for you know, a full inbox or a meeting with your boss or any of these kind of stresses that we actually have. So just cultivating an awareness of where we are in that stress response, and being able to kind of take ourselves back into, okay, and another really good way of shifting yourself from the stress response. So the stress response tend to be very focused vision. So if you think of a lot of the things that we do, it's tunnel vision. So we're kind of focused in on I'm focusing in now on my PowerPoint, or on an email that I'm writing, or a task that I'm doing. We tend to have this very focused, and when we're focused in, we have that shallow breathing. So one of the really simple things you can do is just sort of look up and expand your vision. So just regularly throughout my day, I look out the window just for a few seconds, because I know that just automatically shifts me into the relaxation response. So sometimes, go on, yeah.
It's funny you say that. We live near we're in Cromer, and we live near the sea. And the other day, yesterday, we went down, and it was the first time, because of the weather, that I'd been down to the sea. And I remember I looked up and actually looked at the sea for the first time in maybe a week, and I could just feel myself take the biggest breath ever. And it was a real realization of how that open space and looking up at it is so good for me. I know it feels good to be by the sea, but it kind of clicks a little bit, how much of an impact that had. So that's just sort of seemed relevant to what you were saying, just looking up and automatically taking that huge breath. Like my body's response to looking around me, because I'd been so busy being cold and looking down and being hunched over, that was the first time I'd kind of done that. So
it has such an impact, and it's important to have those little things in your day that actually shift you. One of my clients that was really suffering from stress, and obviously we're all kind of shut in at the moment, but she's just got into the habit of opening her back door and looking at, she's got a nice tree in her garden, so she goes there 5-6 times a day, and just that act of kind of looking out the door for 30 seconds is just kind of shifting back into and creating that awareness of being tense and being relaxed. So yeah, really powerful to kind of have that awareness. And thinking of it as resetting. Every time you're kind of resetting, and your body is then able to manage that transition. And if you look at essentially menopause is the reverse of puberty. And you look at, my daughter will love that I use her as an example so much, but she's 12 and a half and hit that point. But literally about a month ago, she went from getting up at 6:30 on a weekend to maximize her screen time to I have to wake her up at 12, for lunch. And it was like that. And it's just this need she has. She's going through puberty. Her body needs more rest. It's just, and by like 4 hours, she needs this extra chunk of rest. And our bodies are doing just as much in reverse, but there isn't that kind of, nobody's really, well, we could probably sleep till 2, but Lord only knows what would happen when we woke up. So there is this, I think it's really important to accept that we may need to rest a bit around this time, and to give ourselves that, but also to recognize that if we can be good to ourselves in this time and give ourselves a bit of extra sleep and rest, that we do come through that. That's not where we stay for the rest of our lives, that we just diminish in energy and never come back. But this is a little kind of incubation period where we may need to take a little bit more care of ourselves, and give ourselves the kind of leeway that we give to teenagers, who are going through a similar process. So this is just, a reminder of the calm breath is what you instinctively did once you unclenched your fists and once you looked out of the window. But it's the kind of sighing out. So you're breathing into your belly, and then when you breathe out, you kind of really let your shoulders sink. And it can be helpful to kind of count in to 4 and out to 8. But the key is that longer out breath. It is that kind of expansion into the belly and the longer out breath. And it's like having a lever that you can kind of switch into that relaxation. So I think we talked a lot before I put the video on about moodiness, and this is one of my favorite topics. So just to give you a little bit of kind of background, and sorry if you already are aware of this, but this is a typical menstrual cycle. And of course, none of us have a typical menstrual cycle. So this will vary from woman to woman. But essentially, if you look at day 14, we're imagining that that is where we're ovulating. So at the first half of your cycle, so from day 1 would be the first day of your bleed. All of your hormones when you're bleeding are kind of flat. So you've got progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen. There's a whole lot more, but we'll keep it simple. So they're flat, and then they start to rise. And then they peak around ovulation. Now, estrogen is quite flirty, quite sociable, quite out there, quite we literally look better when we have estrogen. It plumps our skin cells. Men, if you show, they've done loads of experiments on this where they've shown men pictures of women who are ovulating or not ovulating, and just random women, and they always pick out the women who are ovulating. It just, our features become more symmetrical. Estrogen is just the tart of the hormone world. It's kind of out there, it's friendly, it's yay, let's go, let's party. Progesterone is very similar, but it's much more a kind of nurturing hormone, sometimes quite homely hormone. So it is more the mother hormone that wants to look after everyone, take care of everyone. So look at how this is mapped out in your cycle. So essentially you get that smack of estrogen when you ovulate, which is going to make you horny. And also look at what happens to testosterone at that point. You get like a little kick of testosterone. So that's going to bring you confidence and horniness. So you get this little kick of all of these, but estrogen is the dominant one that is flirty and out there to make sure that you get yourself knocked up around ovulation. And then after that, the progesterone comes in, which is a real nurturing kind of taking care of hormone. It's much more homely. So that one comes in even stronger. So once we've had that dip at ovulation, it comes back, and we get the progesterone, which is stronger. And so progesterone and estrogen I describe as they're domesticating hormones. They literally, it's like they have a similar effect to mother's little helpers. They drug you up to put up with shit. They make you want to be nice to your families. They make you want to take care of people. They make you want to go and be friendly to people, and have sex with them maybe, and then take care of them and all the offspring that come afterwards. That's their job. And so that might come out in different ways for different women. Not all women have families, but they probably are nurturing their friends at that time of the month, or their family, or their husbands, or their work colleagues, or their projects. These hormones really impact us during our menstrual cycle. So in that cycle, we have that real strong urge once a month. And then we're all, and I think we all described that actually the premenstrual bit is hitting us now, but there is a reputation from premenstrual syndrome before menopause, which is that we all get a bit grumpy and a bit narky before our period. And again, if you look at what's happening with the hormones, there's this massive drop. And it also happens around ovulation, but it's the shorter drop. So you might miss it because it only really lasts a day. But I've noticed that when I ovulate, I really feel that one day of just lack of tolerance for my family, and then I'm back in the game. Whereas around about the beginning of my period for a few days, I really can't stand them. And so what's happening, I'll take you on to, so this is menopause. So you can see how those hormones start to tail off, but not in any kind of neat way. But you can also see that they tail off at a different rate. So estrogen remains a lot higher for a lot longer. because the estrogen is all about kicking out the last of your eggs. You know, women actually are quite a few older women have multiple births because their bodies are like, come on, you know, last chance saloon, pushing out those eggs. So estrogen and progesterone really balance each other out. The estrogen helps us put on weight and store fat. Progesterone helps us to get rid of it. It's particularly important around endometriosis, because that's an estrogen dominance. So the progesterone is already lower, and around menopause, the estrogen, particularly at the beginning, is likely to go up in comparison to progesterone. So that balance is even more out of whack, which would have explained why maybe you're experiencing symptoms that you hadn't been experiencing before, because that out of whackness is exacerbating that. So we have initially this spike in estrogen to some degree, but gradually these hormones are tailing off, and so we're not having this this hormonal cocktail every month that makes us want to look after other people. And for those of us, which I think amounts for most of us, who have taken on a bit more than we ought to have at work, at home, that are still doing things for our kids that they can blinking well do for themselves, you know, and all of those things, without that loved up hormone that says, oh, don't worry, I'll do that for you, we just start to feel this rage. and what it is a withdrawal from this hormone. And I like to think of it as nature saying to us, okay, thank you for the stint that you did of, you know, growing humans or nurturing family and friends, or, you know, whatever you've done, however you've utilized that energy. Now it's time for you. You know, those people can do okay on them there. You know, if you've got kids, they can start helping with the chores. They, you know, they can do some cooking or some washing up or whatever it is. So I think although it manifests as this rage, it's actually a kind of unveiling. You know, it's a seeing things differently, freshly, and it's an invitation really to make some adjustments. And that can be quite challenging for our partners or our families who need that explained to them, really. And, you know, I mark it on my calendar now. So the kids are very keen to keep an eye on the calendar, but they also really recognize and respect that. They've been really good at making those adjustments every now and then voluntarily, but truthfully, more often I have to put those things in place myself. I would like to think that they would just jump up and do all the things that I want them to do, but that's not reality. But they accept it and they do it, and particularly around that time. And there's been quite a big adjustment in our house of the amount that I do and the amount that I pass on, which really has helped tame the premenstrual beast for me. And I find that if I am respectful to myself and don't take on too much and delegate, then my premenstrual tension is way less, and the physical symptoms as well. And it does really flare up. And for me, it flares up in heavy bleeding as well, if I've taken on more than my fair share. And it's not just the physical stuff, is it? It's the emotional stuff that we take on that, you know, there's not really a measure of. But who does everyone come to if they've got a problem, you know, or if they need to cry on someone? In our family, it is not Daddy. You know, he is brilliant. He does an awful lot, but I take that emotional weight on, and that's something that's big. You know, it's really important that we start to look at how these things affect us and how we can make adjustments that help to support us. So yeah, I think that's a really important thing. This, I think I mentioned already. So the menopausal ovary is neither failing nor useless. It's simply beginning to shift from its reproductive function to its maintenance function. It's doing in midlife exactly what many people do. It's changing careers. I think that's a really important message. And Christine Northrup, who, if you haven't found The Wisdom of Menopause, it is like this thick, but you can use it as a reference book. But she's very good on, she's a doctor, but she has a very balanced approach between the kind of holistic care, but also, a lot of information about hormone replacement and how to get the right hormone replacement and the risks and the benefits and all the rest of it. So she is an absolute goddess when it comes to menopause. But again, really important that she has this message out there that it is biologically possible for a woman to produce enough of her own estrogen to support optimal health throughout the second half of her life. And this is rarely taken into account, perhaps because stress, unmet needs, and cultural expectations conspire to impair a woman's natural ability to produce adequate levels of estrogen. So, that it's exactly what we were saying earlier, that actually it isn't a biological truth that women can't produce estrogen, but in terms of the lives that we're living and the stress that we're under, that sometimes is the reality for women, unless they are prepared to make changes in their lifestyle. Okay. And I think Herb Benson is another really good person to look at. He introduced mindfulness like back in the 60s. Again, a doctor, so just really bringing that that kind of health and well-being element into medicine, and the kind of the whole body picture, rather than just kind of isolating out and prescribing drugs and operations, but just recognizing the importance of our self-care and our well-being and the things that we actually can do for ourselves as being that third wheel or third leg of good health. So I'm just going to take you back. I'll do this technique in a moment, but I stuck a slide in here today, which I've realized I put in the wrong place. So this is the main areas that I've found that hypnosis helps with menopause. But what I tend to do, and what I love, is when I work with women on anything, they come up with what their issues are, and then we look at what tools we have in the hypnosis toolbox, and we try things out. So this list grows daily, depending on what we've worked out. But generally speaking, so just being able to elicit the relaxation response is a massive pro for hypnosis and menopause, although obviously there are plenty of other ways to do that, and being mindful of where that's coming in. Visualization is a really powerful tool. We did that emotional detox exercise, so you can start to see how what we're thinking, what we're picturing impacts our body physiologically. And we can use that for all kinds of things. So hot flushes is one area where we use that, just picturing cold, remembering cold scenarios. So instead of when you start to feel that buildup of a hot flush, thinking hot flush, I'm going to get hot, and panicking and bringing on the heat, actually thinking calm thoughts and thinking about coolness can actually really be a very powerful tool. I think they studied that hypnosis for menopausal women controlling hot flushes, and 80% were able to either reduce the intensity and or the frequency, or completely eradicate hot flushes just by practicing those techniques. Challenging deep-seated beliefs, so whether they come from us or culture, just being able to kind of recognize the limitations we put on ourselves and rewrite that programming. So sometimes that might relate to beliefs about aging and what we expect out of the second half of our life, and being able to kind of expand that and think bigger, think more about what we would like. But also, sometimes we grow up with these beliefs that limit us, limits about what we think we're capable of, limits about who we are, what we can do, all of these kind of things. So it's a really good opportunity to really embrace that zest for life, that kind of urge to make a shift and to eradicate those beliefs at that time. and access your wisdom, just connecting with your body, and the, you know, your vast experience by this time, and dreaming up a future you. So let's just have a quick look and see what time it is. Get that. All right, so it's 1:30. I know one of you had childcare, so I can make this a really quick demonstration, or it can be about 20 minutes if anybody needs to go.
Yeah, I'm ever so sorry. I am going to have to go because my husband's taking time off just to look after our son. Yeah. So yeah, so
Okay.
What would you like me to do?
What I can do.
Should I just? Sorry.
No, don't apologise. You asked me and I said about an hour, but we ended up chatting a bit longer.
Yeah.
What I can either or both send the end of the video, which will just be this technique, or I have a recording of it, which I can send over to you, and you can have a listen to at another time.
Yeah, either of those would be fantastic. Thank you. It's been really, really interesting and useful. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. And, you know, when we reopen, I'm definitely going to be keeping you in mind when I have people coming in. At least I've got someone now that I feel confident at saying, you know, have you tried chatting to somebody about it? So hopefully we'll have a lot more contact, you know, when things go back to normal. But you know, even from a personal level, it's just been really interesting, really useful information, so thank you ever so much.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
I'll send that over. It'll be a WeTransfer file, so watch out in your junk box, because
okay,
mostly now.
Okay, thank you, and good luck with everything, Catherine. I hope everything starts to ease for you. All right, take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so Catherine, are you okay to keep going, or would you rather get up? Yep, fantastic. So the control room, I'll talk you through it, and this one will be really good for the endometriosis as well. So I don't know if you're experience any discomfort from that, but also you can regulate the estrogen levels. So we can have a play, and I'm quite happy to send you this one as well, so you can play with it at home. All right, so all you need to do is just get yourself comfy and just close your eyes. So just take a moment to tune into your breathing. And again, we've talked a lot about how to just kind of center ourselves in that relaxation response. So you can just use your breath to just deepen that relaxation. And by consciously deciding to focus on that breath, paying attention to the way we can deepen and slow our breath, breathing into our belly, and then taking those longer out breaths. And our conscious minds can only take charge of a small amount of our bodily processes at any one time. The rest are directed by our vast unconscious mind, and these processes are still affected by our thoughts and our beliefs, though often they're running programs that may be outdated simply because we haven't updated our software, so to speak. And up until now, your mind has done the best it could each step along your life's path, and has adapted to challenging experiences in the best way it knew how, given the resources it had available at the time. And once the responses are set, it acts like a computer program from that moment on until these previous responses are reprogrammed. And trance states enable us to communicate our current needs to our unconscious minds, to update our software and redirect and reprogram for newer, more healthy, workable changes. So now it's time for you to become a more active participant and to redirect the programmed responses for a more favourable response. With each step, you're moving to a higher level of your own consciousness, to the control room of your mind. So we're going to just imagine a staircase in front of us that we can climb climbing to the control room of the mind. So just imagine that staircase in whatever way feels right for you. Don't worry if you can't see it, just have a sense of it being there. Counting each step up. 1, moving further up. 2, higher and higher. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. The doorway in front of you is the control room, and as you step forward, the door slides open quickly and easily, and you're now in the control room of your mind. And maybe you can picture that control room. Maybe it looks something like the TARDIS or something else space themed or something more practical. However you visualize that is entirely up to you. Just have a sense of this being the control center that directs all the functions, from your simple communication, like feelings and desires, to more complex processes, internal healing, bodily functions, behaviors, information processing. Just have a sense of the grandness, the importance of this place. See, sense, feel the magnificence of it. And notice all the different dials, knobs, levers, buttons, and controls. Notice all the panels of lights of different colours, different brightnesses. Everything is so well organised and arranged. There are labels and signs, so you immediately know what each control is for. But just let your attention move to that panel of lights, which is connected to your reproductive system. Just walk over to that panel and notice the response dial and the brightness or dimness of the energy and the communications going to that area. This is the default response that's been left in place. And you now have the ability to change that. So just using the control knob or lever, you can set the dials, the circuit brightness to the levels that are most suitable for you now as you enter your wisdom years. You don't even have to know how to do this yourself, because your unconscious mind already knows how. As you change each dial setting, the communication for that change will speed to the area of need, and the changes you've made will happen. So what I want to do is find a tangible control, just so you can get a sense of how this works. So I wonder if you can just scan your body and see if there's an area that maybe feels a bit uncomfortable. Maybe you have, like many of us after 40, an area that gives you a little bit of discomfort or pain. Or maybe there's just an area of discomfort at the moment. Maybe you've got a numb bum for sitting listening to me for the last hour or something like that. So just scan your body for an area that feels uncomfortable. And then just notice the sensations of that discomfort. And look around your control room for the dial for that area of your body. And again, just intend it, just imagine it. There's no right or wrong to the way that you imagine it. And then just notice where that dial or that lever is set currently. And I want you to do an interesting thing. The first thing I want you to do is just gradually increase the discomfort level in that area. So just focus on that area of your body. And just as you turn that lever, that dial up, gradually just feel those sensations increase to begin with. Just feel them intensify. And then once you've done that enough to get a sense of those feelings intensifying, then gradually turn it back down to where it started. And then gradually ease it past that setting. And see how far you can get that down. Maybe possible for you to get it all the way to 0, to most comfortable, or just to nudge it a couple of markers down on this occasion and then come back to it. And so now you have a sense of this, how it works. I want you to go back to the reproductive section and notice the dial labelled progesterone levels. And notice the current setting on the dial. And make any adjustments you instinctively feel are necessary for you to be in the most healthy state possible right now. So with endometriosis, it tends to be that estrogen levels are high and progesterone balances estrogen. So if you are somebody with endometriosis, then you may wish to turn the progesterone levels up a little bit, but just have a sense of that. And then find the dial labelled estrogen. Notice the current setting on the dial. And again, just make any adjustments you instinctively feel are necessary for you to be in the most healthy state possible right now. That's the sound of your estrogen levels adjusting there. Make those adjustments. Just trust that your unconscious mind is listening. And maybe your unconscious mind directs you to other hormones that are in need of balance now. Just maybe you're aware of what they are, or maybe you're just instinctively drawn to a particular dial or lever, and just make those adjustments now. And then you can find the dial labelled hot flushes. Notice the current setting on that dial. Make any adjustments you feel are necessary for you to stabilise your temperature right now and in the future. Maybe that needs turning down a notch or two, or stabilising somehow. And you can become aware of the controls responsible for your emotional levels. Again, maybe make any adjustments you instinctively feel will soothe and balance any emotional turbulence you may have been feeling. But keeping in mind that those emotions are there as messengers for us, so make sure that you're heeding whatever messages they're bringing for you, other adjustments you might need to make in your life. And just become aware of any other controls that you might need to adjust for you to be in the healthiest state possible in mind, body and soul at this time. The time of harvest, where you can reap the gifts and joys of life and embrace the wisdom years, the second half of your life, as you make those adjustments and communications for that change, the updates to this programming, as speeding to those areas of changes that you've made. You can ask your highest self, whatever you sense that to be, if all of these changes are appropriate for you right now. If not, what do you need to allow those changes to take place? But if yes, then just go ahead and make those changes. And it's now time to leave this special place. But know that you'll be able to access this control room anytime you wish to, now that you've created this visual for yourself. So just moving back through the doorway as it closes securely behind you. And walk back down the steps, retracing your steps along the path. Walking back along the path, you can become curious about what changes you'll notice in your day-to-day life as a result of the adjustments you've made. And in a moment, it's going to be time to return to your normal waking day, as your unconscious mind continues to process all of these changes. So just begin by becoming more aware of the room around you, the chair, the bed beneath you, the noises of your home, the noises of my home, sorry. And taking some deeper, more energizing breaths, wriggling fingers and toes, stretching in ways that feel comfortable for you. And then opening your eyes when you feel ready to do so. Okay, so I'm just about to stop the video here. If anybody is listening to this after the occasion, if you want to book a free consultation, then just get in touch and I can talk to you about how hypnotherapy can help you. Okay, and I've shut off the video now, so you're back in view, Catherine. How did you find that? Oh wait, it is still recording. Stopped recording.